With me is Sasha Bowers, who might join us later as Nashawn LaRiviere, but he's in a meeting with ODGFS right now. So Sasha's going to fill in if you have any questions for a youth peer supporter. So we're going to just talk a little bit about giving you a brief introduction to youth peer support, what exists and why we think it's important. So we're going to do the why, the what, the how, and the who. So currently there is no state-supported definition or curriculum for youth-specific peer support. However, there are several agencies that use peer supporters as an intervention tool. We'll talk a little bit about a couple of those agencies. Many use the state adult certification process that exists and add some additional training on site. Some of those agencies around Ohio also use their own local curriculum, and those agencies, a few of those agencies include Alta Behavioral Health Care, Focus on Friends in Hancock County, and Butler Behavioral Health. So I'm assuming that the PowerPoint will be made available to everyone if you want to look into some of those agencies later. Our proposed youth definition of peer support is as follows. I'm not going to go through the whole thing just because of time, but basically any young adult who had previous lived experience in a child serving system. And for the purposes of youth peer support, we look at multi-system youth. So these could be youth who had previous experience in behavioral health, foster care, juvenile justice, school-based interventions, homelessness, or trauma, just to name some. Certainly developmental disabilities. I know a lot of people are on here from there. What does exist in Ohio is a certified adult peer support program. That certification is for any adult 18 and older that has a self-identified mental health or substance use disorder diagnosis only. So it does not include other systems, and the curriculum is focused mainly on substance use disorder as it is currently. And it's more one-on-one recovery support without a system navigation component. There is an advocacy component. We're also in the middle of developing parent peer support. These are parent partners that navigate systems of care. They must be a parent or guardian with a child who has received services. And currently, NAMI is working with Ohio MOS and ODGFS to develop an official process. That has not been finalized, but it's in process. So if people have questions, hopefully we have like a minute for questions. Sasha is also part of that group as well. I added this slide. We won't spend a lot of time on it just in case you're curious about what the current adult certification looks like. And this tells what the process is that currently exists. It's a 16-hour online through eBase Academy. There's a 40-hour in-person, and then you have to have a background check and pass an exam to be able to submit your packet for certification. So we're going to talk a little bit about the barriers currently to youth peer support in Ohio. The first barrier is that it's not directly recognized by the state or any state agencies. There's no federal model out there. There's no official state or federal standards that exist. It's not Medicaid billable currently in Ohio, although some states are starting to make it Medicaid billable. There's no guidance on required training. There's no official defined age or lived experience. And it really does have to look different than other types of adult peer support. There's a huge lack of understanding by local agencies about what it is and how it can be a useful tool in agencies. And I think there's, because of that, a lack of commitment from agencies to do youth peer support. There's also no core curriculum currently in Ohio for youth peer support supervisors. Those are all the barriers. So this is what we think. We'll spend the rest of the time looking at why it can be helpful, particularly to some of the cases that we've heard in these meetings. It should include individuals with lived experience in child serving systems. And a lot of people get confused between a youth peer supporter being a peer-to-peer mentor that are the same age, and we as Youth Move and me personally, as a person who's worked in this field for 25 years, think that it really needs to be someone that's become into recovery or had some success on the other side of the system and should be at least 18 to 30 years old, depending on when they completed any child services treatment. And that can go up to age 21, in some cases with the youth that you work with, 26. So this is why we think that age should be moved a little closer to 30. I also believe that it should include a component of personal development to the person giving, who's being the peer supporter. Also advocacy, both system advocacy and individual advocacy for whatever youth they are working with. Definite training in system navigation and individual coverage, support, and encouragement to the youth that they are assigned to. We feel that the Ohio certification for peer support should include a training process to cover core elements, a state core curriculum, state standards, readiness assessment of an agency, and specialized training. These are the things that we have recommended on all. There are several committees that are looking at this from a state level, and these are some core elements that we have recommended. So here are some of the benefits that we feel or we have seen in the field, that it builds a workforce capacity and a bridge to a lifelong career working with multi-system youth. It can strengthen services and supports you're able to offer to your youth. You get instant street cred, the genuine I know how it feels connection. Sasha's shaking her head. I don't know if you can see her. Establishes a trust relationship faster than an agency could. It's a resource to other service providers. I think this is important too, to help strengthen natural supports, because I think people with lived experience has a different feel for how the family dynamics exist, and can also build culture gap bridges between clinical staff and a youth. And that can be in terms of language or nonverbal communication, and just be able to maybe have a different perspective on what's happening. So these are some more of those, just a review of those key components. We've talked about some, so I'm not going to go through the whole list, but there's a few things on there that I think are really important. One is understanding how to incorporate that peer supporter into your team that already exists, so that it can be an enrichment tool to whatever you're dealing with a particular case or youth. That there should be a lot, if you put a lot into the development of your youth peer supporters and giving them time to really understand your agency, how your agency works, what their expectations are, and do a lot of job shadowing, that will be able to let that peer supporter feel more confident on how to navigate your agency and be a better advocate for the youth moving forward. Understanding potential risk and trauma triggers. If a youth peer supporter is being put into a situation that might be close to their own situation, just making sure that you're taking that initiative to understand what triggers might be available, and understand that peer supporters are not case managers. They have not had a degree in social work or therapy, and you shouldn't be treated as such or be given a job description that requires them to know those particular skills. So here are some outside resources to explore. These are states, Youth Move has looked at all 42 states that have some sort of youth curriculum, and here are some reasons why we picked these states, as well as the 3 that are listed at the bottom. But the most significant, they all have a statewide certification, some sort of Medicaid billable, and a state curriculum that's supported by their state mental health agencies, and in some cases, other child serving agencies. The key thing about Michigan is that they do a whole training and agency readiness plan and checklist before they even certify an agency to say they have that they have peer support as a service. So currently, there's a network of 29 agencies in Michigan that have gone through that readiness process. And Kentucky as well has a network of 19 certified youth-run peer support drop-in centers. I should point out that Kentucky does not have an upper limit on who they consider a youth peer supporter. So they literally told us that they could have a 40-year-old as long as they had lived experience in a child system. So I don't know, we haven't really fleshed that out of how youth feel about having a 40-year-old as a peer support, but that's what Kentucky does. Other states, Georgia, Massachusetts, Wisconsin, Georgia, Massachusetts also utilize peer support in their MRSS crisis response teams. So we're going to wrap this up by going through the lived experience of a youth. So we're going to call this youth Dean, and hopefully quickly in the next 2 minutes you can get a picture, knowing that you've all worked in the field or you've been on these calls, of what Dean's life was like. So from the ages of 0 to 11, multiple foster care placements, juvenile justice involvement, history of acting out in violence, multiple instances of homelessness, learning disability, other diagnosed mental health and physical disabilities, failing school, violent outburst in school, strong long-term history of physical and mental abuse and neglect, and lots of interventions had been tested randomly throughout that entire process, including multiple caseworkers from different agencies and therapy interventions. So a turning point in Dean's life would be from 11 to 18. So the first change came as an involvement in a strong education-based after-school program with a strong, caring adult advisor or director within that program. Even though it's education-based, director was very trauma-informed, and the program was very inclusive culturally. Recognized some untapped resource, recommended Dean to leadership program, developed a network of strong peers within that program, being among peers with lived experience, including older mentors, trained in strategic sharing and advocacy, learned to develop a stronger voice, became empowered to advocate for system change, which led to become empowered for the self, which led to be empowered to leave a super abusive situation, became a National Honor Society member, and became a high school graduate. And I think the path to that, when we talk about, we started to give power to an 11-year-old who had spent his entire life with no power at all, with no voice at all. And so this might be recognizable to some of you. Became a scholarship winner, became a community hero award winner, became a college student, continued to be a youth leader and strong advocate, works on state and federal policies to improve systems, became a certified youth peer supporter, youth in quotes, adult peer supporter once that process became available, and now works around Ohio with hundreds of youth. If Nashawn were on this call, that is Nashawn's story, and he currently works for ODGFS, and I adopted him when he was 18 years old. Nashawn had been a youth in my program, not starting around 11, in our youth empowerment program, and then has also been a youth mentor to other youth in Youth Move, and works with youth through the Bridges program currently at ODGFS. So the story of Nahshon, I'm really sorry that he's stuck in a meeting. I think he's texted me. We only have like 30 seconds left. But the story, what we wanted to get across by utilizing his story was that youth empowerment can work for the youth that you think have no hope at all. Putting them in the right environment with positive peer supports can work, and formalizing that in a youth peer support environment can really enhance the services that you're able to provide for the youth who might seem like the hardest to serve, that doesn't feel like they're making progress. Can be an amazing turnaround with just that right combination of support. And I think we're done, and I don't know that we have time for questions, but do you need anything else from us, Bobby?